Recording. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please can I remind all participants that this meeting will be live streamed and the recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen, or use the raise hand or chat functions. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, they should let the chairman or Democratic Services Officer know. If they have a webcam, they should try turning this off, as this may help their broadband width, so at least they can be heard. Welcome to all members, officers and public speakers and general public who are watching. Onto the agenda. Okay. So firstly, apologies for absence, and I have two currently, Andrew Parker, Councillor Parker and Councillor Margarita Wright. Any more anywhere? No. Okay, thank you. Are you all happy with the minutes of the two meetings? No dissent? Yeah, thank you. Okay, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Yes, Margaret.
Can I declare in item 10, planning application 2021/00378 RG3 Land at Hayes Road, and the other one is, I will get it for you now, is 2019/01031 full, and that is Miser Funding at Bonvilston. As I'm the cabinet member, I'll declare an interest, and if I have to leave the meeting, I will. I'm not quite sure if I have to, but I won't speak.
I believe you do. Mark will clarify that, but I think you do, Margaret.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
So will you put me out and then bring me back in?
I believe it's a yes, Chair. Yes, Councillor Wilkinson. Yeah, we can do that. We can arrange that and let you know when to come rejoin.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnson, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to item 9, enforcement action, land and buildings at Barry Biomass, Woodham Road, Barry, I've previously made comments with regards to this site. However, I wish to clarify that I will be looking at this this item, as all items, on the basis of the information provided here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I have a declaration on 2019/01031 full. I declared previously on this, and I'm declaring again because we were part of the cabinet that made the decision initially. So I will leave the meeting and hand over to my vice chair at the time, who is Ben Gray. No others? Don't see any? No. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we have a report, Public Rights of Way Subcommittee, which I believe Mark is going to give us a quick, a brief précis on.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. Thank you, committee. Obviously, we've got quite a big agenda tonight, so I'll just go through this relatively quickly. It's just a report on the Public Rights of Way Subcommittee. In essence, the purpose of the report and the recommendation of the report is to confirm the reappointment of the Public Rights of Way Subcommittee. This comprising of 4 members, 2 Conservative, 1 Labour and 1 Vale Independence group, with 1 vacancy unfilled.
Just hope he connects.
Could I hang on a minute, Mark? George,
yeah, apologies, yeah.
George Carroll, please can you mute causing feedback?
He's just
And Nick as well, you're not muted. Could you mute as well, Nick Hodges, please? Nick, I don't know if you can hear us. Could you mute?
He's done that now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Mark's disappeared now. Right, he's back again. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, if you'd like to carry on, Mark.
Yeah, okay, Chair. Just to reiterate, this is a report around confirming the reappointment of the Public Rights of Way Subcommittee. This committee comprises of 4 members, 2 Conservative, 1 Labour. and 1 Vale Independence Group with 1 vacancy unfilled. Basically, the committee is required to confirm the reappointment of any subcommittees required for each municipal year. Public Rights of Way subcommittee, comprising 5 members officially, was included in the political balance table, which was used at the annual meeting on the 10th of May 2021 in terms of appointment of committees generally. The membership is broken down as follows: Conservative group being Councillors Cave and Driscoll, Labour group Councillor Drake, and Vale Independent group Councillor Bird. In essence, that's a quick summary of the report. I'm not sure, Chair or the committee have any questions or anything to follow up, but obviously, you know, we'll address those as they come along.
Thank you, Mark. Are we happy as a committee to note this? Any? Yeah.
Move the note, Chair.
Thank you very much. We will note that. That moves us on to building regulation applications. Agenda item 5. Happy to note? Yeah.
Chair,
Yes,
just really quickly, before the meeting, we had a couple of questions from members about why there were some developments on the list which were in Bristol and in Newport and in Cardiff in other locations. And it's just to confirm that as an authority, we're in partnership with some other building regulations authorities and other builders, and we can undertake the vetting of plans for properties that are located outside of the Vale. So it's something we do, as we've got quite a robust building control team, and they do this work in partnership with other local authorities and indeed other building construction firms. So that's why there are some on there which are obviously from locations outside of the Vale. Thank you,
Marcus. Very helpful. Okay, agenda item 6 is planning applications determined by delegated powers. Happy we note?
Yeah, move a note, Chair.
Thank you very much. That leaves us on to appeals. Are you happy that we note this?
Yeah, move a note.
Sarah, you didn't want to come in on this at all? No, or Vicky or anybody? No.
No, it's just for members to note.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Agenda item 8 is trees. Are you happy that we note this? Delegated list? Yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay. Enforcement action. Now then, Sarah. Land and building at Barry, Biomass, Woodham Road in Barry. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I was going to just lead on it. And
sorry,
then
I thought Sarah was...
No, that's okay. If that's okay with Sarah, I'll lead on it and bring Sarah in at that point, because she can explain the actions that have gone on beyond. So if I just started off and then I'll have you for Sarah to come in then.
Yes, thank you.
So that's fine. So obviously members of the committee will be aware that this has a long-standing planning history going back to 2008 when the first planning application was submitted for a wood-burning power station on the site. That application was actually determined by the planning committee and refused, but subsequently allowed on appeal. The current development on the site was undertaken following the approval by Committee of Application 2015 00031 out. That application itself and the development has been subject to a number of complaints following the commencement of its construction in approximately late 2016, early 2017. The report sets out at page 66 details of some of the issues that have arisen. A water tank was constructed as part of the scheme, which wasn't in the original approved plans. That subsequently led to another planning application, which sought to vary the terms of the original planning approval in 2015. Unfortunately, they then decided they would take the water tank down and withdrew the planning application. However, following that and following ongoing discussions subsequent to that, site inspections were undertaken late in 2019, early 2020, and a number of further discrepancies were identified at the plant in terms of its construction, and I shall run through those really quickly. And once we've just gone through a couple of the other issues associated with it, obviously alongside all these discussions, there has been an ongoing conversation with Welsh Government and the applicant about the need or otherwise for an environmental impact assessment for the development. When the original application came in 2008, it was judged that an environmental impact assessment was not required, and that was ratified by the appeal inspector who made the decision in 2010. Subsequent to that, in 2015, again, the application was assessed, and the council advised it did not feel an environmental impact assessment was required. It felt that the development fell within Schedule 2, not Schedule 1 of the environmental impact regulations. That was subsequently upheld by Welsh Government, who, at the request of a third party, undertook their own assessment and confirmed that they felt an environmental impact assessment was not required. Since that time and since the determination of the application, Welsh Government's view has changed, and they are now of the opinion, finally, via a letter we received in July, that an environmental impact assessment is required, and the applicant has indeed agreed in conjunction with Welsh Government to submit an environmental impact statement or environmental statement as part of that assessment. That information is with Welsh Government and is currently going through that process. So we have got to the point where we've got to, where we have an application of approval from 2015, but a development that has been constructed on site which differs from that approval in 2015. Just to set out really quickly what the details are of that breach, and they're all in the report. Sarah's done a really good job of picking all those out as part of her investigation. The most significant discrepancy, if you like, is the fact that the actual plant is handed. So if you look at page 70 of your report, you'll see that the plan shows two large towers. Those towers, cylindrical towers, those towers are actually shown on the wrong side, or have been constructed on the wrong side of the building to what was actually approved as part of the 2015 application. There have been a number of other elements of plant and equipment which have been constructed which weren't shown on the 2015 permission. Some of which may have been permitted development, although in our view in the case of most of those are that because they were done as part of the actual development of the site, then your permitted development rights only arise once the development is completed, and the development itself hasn't been completed, and therefore they can't be claimed as permitted development. So there are a number of items there. If you look at page 72, there is item 1, which is a lean-to. There's also a compressor house, lean-to compressor house, item 2. A urea silo, which wasn't shown on the original plan, item 3, which is another cylindrical tank. There's also an incline conveyor, which wasn't shown on the approved plans. That can be seen on page 74, travelling up the side of the lower building at the side there. And finally, a screening tower and dust extraction system, and these are located centrally on the higher part of the building, again shown on page 75. And finally, and there's also a emergency diesel generator and diesel tank, which is item 6. And I missed off a fire kiosk as well. And finally, they've also reconstructed the fire water tank and pump house, which was removed from the site and was previously the subject of another application. That's also been reconstructed on the site. So all these items have been constructed outside of the original planning approval. We have been talking to the developers about this for some time and have advised them that there is a need for what we call a Section 73A application, which is an application to regularise the position as it currently stands on the site. You will note that I didn't refer to it at the start, but there is a late item submitted by the applicants where they run through these items in their letter and advise that they think that enforcement action is heavy-handed and that the items should be dealt with separately and individually. And this really comes to the crux of the matter in terms of the differences between the council and the developer. We very much feel that these are part and parcel of the scheme as a whole and therefore should be dealt with as a comprehensive submission. The developer remains of the view that they should be dealt with in a piecemeal fashion with each individual item coming in separately. So we have actually got to a little bit of an impasse, and at that point we are very concerned about the possibility of this development being deemed to be possibly lawful by virtue of having 4 years of construction, if you like, 4 years. It hasn't been completed, and we're sure it hasn't been completed. But we are very nervous about the position that could arise were the development to exist on site for 4 years, and were the development deemed to be so different from the original approval as to be not covered by that approval, then you could get into a position where the council would be looking at a lawful development without any conditions controlling the development. So we are recommending to you, or requesting to you, that enforcement action is authorised, which protects the position of the council. We are doing that on the basis that any notice would require the removal of the plant, but essentially this is to require the developer and to encourage the developer to regularise the development properly as part of a comprehensive scheme. There is obviously a right of appeal against the enforcement notice, and we undoubtedly expect that might well be exercised by the developer. But we obviously, what will follow from that will either be an appeal against the enforcement notice, possibly, or indeed a comprehensive planning application to attempt to regularise it. So that's probably the best I can do in terms of summing everything up. Sarah, did you want to come in? Is there anything more you wanted to add in terms of your investigation?
I think you've summed it up. I don't think there's anything further I can add to that, Marcus. Obviously, the recommendation is set out in the report, and you know, that would be to ensure that we could continue to enforce planning conditions in the future to protect residential amenity and highway safety and the local environment. So that's why we're taking action.
Okay, thank you both. I have a hand up from Neil Thomas. Neil, you wanted to ask a question, and
yes.
After that, Rhiannon Birch.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wanted to refer to the letter from DIAG, which we've all had the opportunity to see, which claimed that a discontinuance order would achieve more than an enforcement order. The biomass people have said they will appeal the enforcement order if we go that route, tying up for months to come what could prove to be a very expensive appeals process. Could officers please offer us further guidance on these two alternatives?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I'm sure Marcus will now.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Chair. Yes, essentially, the discontinuance notice is not a very simple process at all. It's very, very complicated, as you would imagine. Removing a planning permission which has already been granted is not straightforward. But the important point to note is, with a discontinuance notice, Welsh Government have to agree it. So we could apply to Welsh Government for it to be issued, but again, Welsh Government have to confirm that notice. They've already stated in their letter regarding the environmental impact assessment, they do not believe that the discontinuance notice is appropriate. So from the point of view of protecting the council's position, we could get into a long, protracted legal discussion about a discontinuance notice, which would have to be confirmed by Welsh Government, and time could pass, which would allow, for example, a lawfulness argument to be enacted for this plant. Once we serve an enforcement notice, the clock is stopped. There is no matter what happens after that, no matter how many appeals happen after that, and obviously time could take, no matter how many planning applications are submitted after that, any enforcement notice served stops the clock in terms of claiming lawfulness. So from the point of view of protecting the council's position, this is a far better mechanism for doing that. There is, it's important to note that discontinuance notice is not a straightforward process, and indeed would have to be justified in terms of its why have you served that instead of an enforcement notice, when clearly in the legal position would be that an enforcement notice is the appropriate mechanism under planning law to deal with the issues we have before us.
Thank you, Marcus. I see Rhiannon or Mark have their hand up. Not quite sure which one.
It is Mark, Chair. Just an additional point I would like the officer to consider as well is the possibility to look into perhaps a temporary stop notice on this application as well. I just wonder, perhaps, can we look into the legality of that?
Chair, if I can come back really quickly on that, we have actually looked at that at this stage, and Currently, it's not appropriate because although there has been some operation on the site in terms of testing and smoke being emitted, they have not commenced operations. So we're still in the position where they have not commenced operations. So a temporary stop notice is not going to achieve anything. And I think actually at this point we would open the council to possibly a claim of costs unnecessarily, where the correct procedure would be to keep that under advisement, watch to see if there is any move towards actually generating electricity or moving to commence operations at the site, which is not where we are at the moment. And that would then be a matter for us to consider with Welsh Government, because remember now Welsh Government are involved in this process through their assessment of the environmental impact. That is not going to be a council assessment. That will be assessed by Welsh Government, so they are involved in that process. So before we were to take any action for any further action around temporary or permanent stop notices, we would have to do that with advisement from Welsh Government. But at this stage, we don't believe one is necessary. We think the enforcement notice protects the council's position and the position of local residents to a point where we are comfortable now.
Okay, thank you. Right, I don't see any further hands up. So I will ask committee, are you happy that we authorise this enforcement action? I'm guessing we're not going to need an individual vote. If you are not happy, please speak within the next 30 seconds or so, or put your hand up or motion. Otherwise, we will say it is a unanimous decision. Thank you, committee. Good.
I was going to say, Chair, sorry, presumably we just need to have a proposer and a seconder. I don't know if that's the case. Mark maybe can justify the case. I'm happy to move. I'm sure there's a presser who are happy to second.
I will certainly second it, as is in my board.
There you are. We've got lots of people moving and seconding. We've got no dissenters, so we will take it. It's a unanimous committee decision that we have authorised action there. So that moves us on to agenda item 10, planning applications. And you will remember this application from our last planning committee where we agreed to defer it because we did not approve it. And Ian is going to run through now the updated report. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, this application came before committee a month ago. It's an application for extensions at the front and rear of number 3, the White House in Barry. At the time it was discussed at last committee, the move to approve the application was not successful, and consequently, as you mentioned, the application was deferred for officers to return back with suggested reasons for refusal. The officer recommendation remains as it was last time to approve the application, but the report sets out suggested reasons for refusal if members are obviously minded to refuse the application as per last time. When it was deferred, the concerns that were cited were fourfold. They related to the visual impact of the extension, the impact on the neighbouring property, absence of the necessary amenity space, and insufficient parking. Having reviewed this again, officers are of the view that the reason regarding amenity space is extremely difficult to substantiate because the remaining garden quite simply would exceed what the council standards require. So the report sets out a recommended 3 reasons for refusal, which I'll read out now. Number 1, by reason of its scale and design, the proposal would result in an incongruous addition to the property that would detrimentally impact upon the appearance and character of the street scene and the wider conservation area. The proposals would therefore fail to comply with policies MD2, MD5, MD8 and SP10 of the LDP. A second reason, by reason of its scale, form, proximity to the boundary with the neighbouring property and projection past the neighbour's front elevation, the proposed extension would result in an imposing and overbearing impact on the neighbour at number 1 White House to such an extent that it would unacceptably impact upon the living conditions of the occupiers. The proposal is therefore contrary to the advice set out in the council's SPG and policies MD2 and MD5. And thirdly, the proposals would result in an unacceptable demand for parking which cannot be provided on site or within the immediate street scene. The proposals would therefore fail to comply with policy MD2 of the LDP and the council's parking SPG. So those are what officers are recommending as being the 3 reasons for refusal, if members are minded to refuse the application.
Thank you, Ian. Right, so I don't think we need to debate this, but what I do need is somebody to move refusal and second refusal. Nick, are you going to do that?
Yes, I will, Chairman. I will move the refusal, and I am content with the 3 reasons given.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Ian?
Yes, I spoke on this item at the last meeting, Chair. I'll happily second those reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will do the roll call vote on this one, as you're all familiar with. So it starts with me, and I will abstain. The next one is Councillor Ben Gray.
Abstain, Chair.
And the Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Christine Cave.
Sorry, Chair, could I just clarify what it is we're voting on?
Yes, we're voting.
I can remember at the last meeting that we had, I thought we said we wouldn't vote on it, that we would just get reasons. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused here.
Okay, I will clarify, but I thought it was, I thought Ian did that. The last meeting, it was not approved. I think it was proposed for approval, and it fell. So we deferred it to get reasons for refusal. We are now voting on that refusal.
So we're not voting on the reasons for the refusal. We're just voting on whether we're going to refuse or not. Is that, can I?
Well, those reasons are being used in the refusal, yes.
So we're just voting on a refusal again. Is that right?
Yes.
Rather than the reasons.
Nick moved refusal. It was seconded by Ian, and that's what we're voting on. Ben, I'll bring you in now. It's a bit right. I'll pause the vote, and I'll bring Ben in now.
So I just wanted to clarify. We didn't vote to refuse. We didn't. Last time we voted not to approve, which is a similar thing we've done before. So this is a vote to refuse. Because we're having a vote again, and I'm not going to double jeopardy the situation, I'm going to abstain, as I just did, because I can't vote against the officer recommendations. The last time I voted for them, but we are allowing this because this is what the committee wanted. We just had to get the reasons for refusal. So we now have a mover for refusal who has the reasons there. Because it was a householder application, it wasn't possible to do that simply after the meeting, and we're having a vote on refusing it.
Correct.
And so that's where we are now. So,
okay. So
I wanted to clarify why I was abstaining.
Yeah, back to Christine then. Christine.
Well, thank you everybody for that clarification. Yes, so I am voting to refuse.
To refuse. So you're voting for a refusal. Yeah. Councillor Pam Drake.
I vote to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Vince Driscoll.
I'll vote to refuse as well.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart Edwards.
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges. You
for refusal. Yeah, for refusal.
Councillor Johnson, I'm assuming.
For refusal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kemp.
For refusal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parker is absent. Councillor Rowlands.
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Thomas.
Similar to Ben, abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, Eddie Williams.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Wilson.
For refusal.
Thank you. And Margarita Wright is not here either, so absent. Okay, clearly we have refused it. If you want to know the numbers, there were 6 abstentions and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for the refusal. So that was a lot less complicated than I thought it might have been. Thank you. We will move on now to 2021-00316 full. and this is the garden of the villa, Trehenedd Lane, Peterson Super Ely. We do have a speaker on this, but Steve Butler is going to introduce it, and then I will bring our speaker on it, who is Councillor Michael Morgan. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, just share the plan if I may. So as the Chairman has just stated, this is an application for a new 3-bedroom dwelling located in a dwelling called the Villa in Trehenedd Lane in Gwynedd Steeple. So the application itself is to build a retirement dwelling. So in terms of the application site, to give a bit of context, this is a settlement of Peterson Super Ely with a defined settlement boundary around it. Gwynedd Steeple, these sort of linear development as you drop down into Peterston, and this is a secondary road off that, which I think leads up to Pendoylan. So the property itself, if you just zoom out a bit, is, apologies, my thing's a bit slow. There we go. So the existing dwelling is located at the end of a run of linear dwellings along the lane. So it's the last house before the access track, which the proposal is to subdivide the property and build a house in the side garden. That's how the existing is laid out. So in terms of the design of the property, it's a 3-bedroom dwelling, dormer-style dwelling with integral garage. Materials and finishes very much of the local vernacular, rendered elevations, stone detailing, and stone arches, etc. So from our consideration of the application, the main issue again is, as with lots of these applications in the countryside, is the issue of sustainability and the location of the property. So just going back very briefly to this plan, the site itself is about 1.1 kilometres away from Peterson Super Ely. Obviously, being a defined minor rural settlement, that settlement has facilities, shops and services, etc., where if you lived within the settlement, you wouldn't have to have a car. Our principal concern with this application is the distance and the ability to walk safely from the application site to the nearest settlement. And it's for that reason, really, that the application is considered unacceptable. In terms of visual impact, there will be an impact on the countryside, but in terms of the character of the streets, it would generally continue the built form of development, albeit it would be the last house in that linear run. But say the recommendation in the report is to refuse the application, and primarily on the basis of the site not being in a sustainable location. It's also worth noting that there is previous, as the report clearly sets out, there's previous planning history to the site. Back in 2007, we refused an outline application. Again, that was based more generically on it not being rounding off an impact on the countryside, but again, there has been quite significant development pressure on this site, and the current refusal and certainly the current drive for sustainability, it's one that we can't support. Just to touch the point on the type of application, obviously it's been described as a retirement dwelling. Obviously, we are starting to see a few more applications with this sort of proposal. Just to say that clearly the existing house is a large house, but equally what's being proposed is a large 3-bedroom dwelling, detached dwelling of quite some size. As the report clearly sets out, there's nothing in national or local planning policy that would allow us to make any kind of special dispensation to allow a retirement dwelling to be built in someone's garden where such a dwelling wouldn't be acceptable under normal circumstances. So we are considering it as an open market dwelling, and it would be very, very difficult for us to condition and that it could only be a retirement dwelling that would fail the tests we have to put to make conditions sound and justifiable. So if I hand back to you, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so we have Councillor Michael Morgan, who is going to speak to us. Michael, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good.
I don't know if you want to, yes, switch your camera on as well, Michael. Good. Okay, you know the drill. You have 3 minutes from now.
Right, the first and main reason for refusal lies on a rather subjective and limited definition of sustainable development, that the distance and substandard walking route to the closest settlement services would likely to be reliant on a private car. Now, the Sustainable Development Principle seeks to ensure that the needs of the present are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, this is far more than whether or not we use our cars. If local transport is seen as a challenge to sustainability, then it is our responsibility as a local authority to address that. And the Vale Councils are already doing that with the introduction of a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit through Gwenna Steeple through to Peterston Village, a road that is used regularly by pedestrians of all ages, including young children on their way to school. Within easy walking distance, there are a host of facilities enjoyed by the hundreds of people who live in the Peterston community, a village shop, 2 pubs, village hall, a Mooga multi-use games area, church, chapel and garage. There is a regular and fairly reliable bus service running every 2 hours from Talbot Green to Cardiff via Peterston and back again. This goes right past the front gate of the application site, and it is usually possible to hail the driver anywhere on this route rather than walk to the stop. Within a mile of this site at Sycamore Cross, we see the construction of 127 new houses. I suggest it is highly unlikely that the hundreds of new residents there will be queuing for the X2 bus each day. They will be using their cars. The lockdown has reminded us how we can all survive by relying on home deliveries from supermarkets and online retailers. In many respects, this is a return to the pre-supermarket era when rural areas were served by mobile shops and the support of friends and neighbours. We've all learned to use Zoom and Team for social and business purposes as we are now. This may be a preview of the sustainable communities of the future. I would therefore ask this committee to accept that this is a proposal for sustainable development and to consider the points made in my letter of support today concerning the provision for retirement housing in our rural communities. We are reminded that there is no policy for retirement housing, although it must surely be accepted that this is essential for the sustainability of our communities in the future. We need a change of policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, Steve, did you want to come back on any of those points, or shall I open up for debate?
Yes, I would like to. So certainly, a number of the points raised by Councillor Morgan are clearly set out in the report. I mean, certainly in relation to bus service, as the report says, it's a 2-hourly bus service. I mean, there is a degree of subjectivity as to whether we think a site is in a sustainable location or not, but I think it's safe to say that a 2-hourly service is not frequent enough to meet the needs of effectively a household in getting to daily services. Obviously, I understand that the proposal is for retirement, and the assumption would be that the person occupying it wouldn't be going to work, but equally, I don't think we have details of the age of the age of the occupier. But we're not, again, the Future Generations Act and the sustainable principles. No one is arguing against that. At the moment, the national policy, planning policy Wales, Future Wales, etc. They're very, very definite on what sustainable development is in terms of proximity to services, and there's a significant number of paragraphs through, particularly in Planning Policy Wales, that seek to ensure that new development is sustainably located without relying on the use of the private motor car. So at the moment, our decision has to be made in line in Planning Policy Wales and indeed our own local development plans. So until our policies change or until Welsh Government reflect the change in the way that we live and operate and go to work and receive services, say our position has to remain really as set out in the report. Obviously, Sycamore Cross, I mean, that is, that's a site in Bomstead, that is part, and it is within the settlement boundaries. So if we're in the settlement boundary, it would be a very, very different discussion. But we are sympathetic, and I think perhaps going ahead with the LDP, we'll be looking at the concept of retirement, how that's going to work nationally and through national policy and local policy. I'm not really sure. I see Mark has got his hands up, so I'm sure Mark has got possibly a few words to say on that. But dealing with, we have to make decisions in relation to the development plan. From the development plan purposes, the site is not considered in a sustainable location.
Thank you, Steve. Marcus, I see you have your hand up, and then I see either Mark or Rhiannon has their hand up after that, and then Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just to come back on a couple of the points. Steve's dealt with most of them, actually. Obviously, we do have some sympathy when people talk about retirement and want to move to smaller properties. And indeed, we're all aware around the lack of properties, sometimes which are more considered more suitable, sometimes like bungalow properties or indeed flatted properties. However, this is not a retirement property. Just to stress that really, really strongly, we cannot condition it or control it that it remains a retirement property. It is a large 3-bedroom property, possibly more appropriately could be converted into a 4-bed property if you look at the garage, integral garage included within the scheme. It's set within very extensive grounds. There would be very limited scope for controlling extensions to it in the future and changes to make it even larger. And of course, there's nothing to say that it couldn't just be sold off as a normal traditional property in the countryside. So I think it's important to note that while we do recognise and have sympathy, while this has been called a retirement dwelling, it isn't a retirement dwelling in terms of the planning system and cannot be controlled in that respect. And therefore, on that basis, would have created a terrible precedent for future development, which we've all looked at and we've all considered in the past. I think the issue here is that it isn't within a settlement boundary or even close to the edge of a settlement boundary where we have had these debates. The council itself is looking to try and resolve some of these issues, but through the provision of some accommodation, it is developing through the housing department. Indeed, we have an application which includes that later on this agenda. And it's important to note that as a council, we're trying to do that. Clearly, there is a role for the policymakers at national level to deal with this, to actually set out a bit like, we talked about this before, but a bit like agricultural dwellings, perhaps providing some provisos that would allow us to condition and control properties and maintain it as a retirement property going forward. I would dearly love them to actually set out criteria, for example, for ensuring 10% of every development has to have is bungalow development, so that you have that need for those people who are either disabled or who are getting older, that they can stay on one level. And it's such a shame that we don't have that policy yet. I do hope that will be considered as part of future policy changes. But just to sort of stress that point, that is not what you're considering now. This is a property which, to all intents and purposes, could be a 3 or 4 bedroom house anywhere in the countryside, and there will be no control over it going forward.
Thank you, Marcus. Okay, so I'm guessing it's Mark who...
No, it's Rhiannon, actually. Yeah, I do talk as well. What I was going to say, Marcus has answered most of the things that I was going to ask, because what has become clear is that there is absolutely no legal definition of what constitutes a retirement property. It doesn't even have to have somebody retired in it. It could just be somebody intending to retire. I mean, as someone who is, in the prime of life, when I would go to retirement property, I think I would be looking for a bungalow, not too many steps, a nice bathroom, etc. And this house does not fit any of those classifications, does it? So, in fact, you could call almost anything a retirement property. So it's disappointing, really, that whoever has put the application in thinks that we are so dull that we are going to be taken in by this 2-word phrase that is meant to convey something completely different to us. So I won't be supporting the application.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Is that a movement then? Are you moving?
Happy to move refusal.
Right, thank you. Okay, Marcus, you had your hand up then, did you? No?
Yes, it was only to say, obviously, I mean, I cast no aspersions on the applicant or anyone else, but it obviously clearly isn't really designed for retirement purposes, and also to just reiterate the point that Councillor Birch made, it's a very valid point that at the moment the only real mechanism you can have to control the occupier would be through something like a lease process. So if it was a council property, to control the lease and the letting of it to only people of a certain age. You'll be aware that in the past we had all sorts of issues in Dinas Powys with a scheme we tried to put into a private scheme for older persons accommodation. That's really fraught with difficulty. Again, we had to try and use the legal mechanisms of the lease to try and do it. But currently there is no sound planning mechanism to do that, which is such a shame, but there isn't. And I think we would be it would be really difficult to enforce. We talked about Section 106 in the past. The trouble with that is that the minute it gets beyond 5 years, it's open to challenge. And I can guarantee you that any inspector who looking at it, if there was no other control over it, would just take the view that wouldn't be substantiated unless policy changes in the future. So just to reiterate that point, it's a very good point made by Councillor Birch. There's very little control we can place on it.
Thank you, Marcus. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to second refusal. I would note I've read the beginning page of the application. I'm aware who the agent and architect is. They would have declared an interest had they been present at this meeting. So I'm not going to make any statements about them. But I do share Michael's thoughts on policy changing. And as we have noted previously, even where there's been a smaller dwelling nearby, it hasn't been with policy, and I think in those cases I was more minded I was on the fence, but happy to go with the policy decision. On this occasion, it's certainly in view of the PD rights it would have to extend to be a really substantial property in the future. I'm really happy to second refusal.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yes, I agree that we do need to look at the recommendations and whatever, but that's a long-term thing, and until we've got it set out in our guidance and in Welsh Government policy, unfortunately we are stuck with what we've got. So we've had a move and a seconder to refuse this application. I'll kick off the vote if nobody else wants to speak. I will support that. I will vote for the recommendation. Councillor Gray seconded, so I'm guessing you will vote
for officer recommendations.
Yeah. Councillor Birch moved it. Are you happy to vote for the refusal?
For recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cave.
For officers' recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drake.
For officers' recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll.
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
For the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Parker's not here. Councillor Rowlands.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
For the officer's recommendations.
Oh, I needn't have done my sheet. There you are, unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to the next one, which is the Reg 3, and Margaret has declared on this. So first and foremost, I'll have to ask Margaret to leave the meeting if she could. Yeah.
I guess just with that, Chair, now I'll take it out now, basically. Bear with me a second.
Yes, yes, of course.
A reference to unplugging from the matrix.
There you are. I think Margaret has been removed.
Yes, she has, Councillor.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you all for your patience. So I believe Ian is going to introduce this to us. It is 2021-00378 Reg 3, or RG3, sorry, land at Haywood, the Bendricks, Surrey. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Is it okay if I share my screen to get the plan?
Please do, yes.
Do we have these now? Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So this is a planning application for 53 houses and flats, a council housing scheme, land at Haywood Road in Barry. The development would be made up of a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom units, but the bulk being smaller 1 and 2 beds. So there would be a frontage of houses here facing Haywood Road, main access point in here, a secondary row of houses along the rear, and then a 3-storey building of apartments at the eastern side of the site, with some open space, drainage features in the northeastern corner near to the existing roundabout. These are the house types. Actually, I'll bring up the artist's impressions, which show the there you go. So that's probably the best image just for getting a feel of the kind of design and character of the houses. The development would be served by 86 parking spaces, which officers are of the view are ample to serve the number and the tenure type of the houses in question. The development also involves providing on the highway, can't see it really, but I'll indicate where, providing a new right turn lane into the site, which means that vehicles coming from an east to west direction wouldn't be sitting waiting behind traffic, waiting to turn into the site. And also the widening of the footway along Haywood Road to 3.5 metres, such that it would function as a combined cycleway footway. It would actually then link into the cycleway footway that runs through the adjacent site. I will actually bring that up for you. Here we go. So this is a good plan to show context. This is the site. These are existing houses fronting Hayes Road. This land here, committee members may recall, it was a couple of years ago, but we approved a residential development of affordable homes on this site. And the footway cycleway would run along here and through this site out onto Hayes Road, and then the LDP contains a proposed cycle route that goes through the docks. So it's really a mixed sort of context. You've got residential here, residential being constructed here. This is actually allocated, this site, in the local development plan for residential. So the principle of residential development has effectively been approved through the LDP process. Land opposite is allocated employment, land opposite here, allocated employment, and the hatched land is existing employment. Given that the development is over 25 units, there are financial contributions associated with it. Council's policy is not to seek financial contributions on developments up to 25, but this is 53. So there would be financial contributions based on 28 units, which are set out at the end of the report. Just to touch on affordable housing need in the area, although we've been doing quite well lately with affordable housing in Castle and Ward, and the numbers are set out in the report, with I wouldn't say it doesn't touch the sides, but we've still got some way to go to meeting affordable housing need, and it's really through developments like this where we're going to be able to get close if at all possible. And it's also a really good example of the council not resting on its laurels and expecting registered social landlords to take the lead with trying to meet that affordable housing need. It's another development where the council is trying to take the initiative and really be responsible for meeting as much of that need as we can. So it would be another sizable contribution towards housing need in the ward. Still work to go, but a not insignificant contribution to that need. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. We have no matters arising and no speakers on this, so straight into any debate if anybody wishes to. I don't see any hands up. I do see Councillor Drake.
Yes, I did put, I've got nothing against this affordable houses because we do need them desperately in the ward, but I had to raise the concerns about some of the businesses that have come to me because I don't know whether people know this area. It is a very, very heavy road. and you know, heavy traffic road, you know, so the one business was concerned that complaints could be made later on, which could curtail the movement of traffic along this road. So that's why I actually condemn, but I am again, I'm for all this affordable homes, definitely.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got a few more hands up now. Councillor Johnson, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. And this is an interesting site, as Ian has pointed out. It's part of the local development plan. It's also a site that was in part suggested could be a gypsy and traveller site. And some of you who are on the Homes and Communities Committee will remember the meeting that took place in the Vale a couple of years, which discussed that as an issue. So this has been allocated for social housing. I think I've got a wider query which comes out of this LDP process and goes into the replacement LDP about the role of the Bendricks, because this is allocated housing and also industrial works. We had the waste station discussion quite recently, which I think so Councillor Drake is talking about the impact of lots of vehicles and lots of other people. Well, you know, we did have that debate, you know, quite recently, where we pointed out that there was a large amount of housing allocated, and I think Victoria was here at the time and pointed out, well, this has gone through the LDP process and it's been agreed within the LDP process. My concerns, I think, are about the Bendricks as a community, our consideration of services, of availability. We've got it's 53 units. I think there's actually on page 150 there's a typo where it says 58 units, but I think 53 is the number that are actually in there. But it's very car heavy. So even though there are buses, and there, you know, I've been down down that road on a bus late at night on the way back home, and there is a cycleway proposed to go across the docks, etc. This is quite a car heavy development, particularly compared to other social housing developments. So I mean, I know some of us with very urban town centre locations are told that they're sustainable and social housing doesn't require car parking spaces, but apparently there's an awful lot here, more than one per household. So I think there's some interest. It seems to me a good scheme in many ways, but I think it also raises questions about the role of the Bendricks and the role of the Bendricks community as we go forward, and consideration of how we as a council supports this community, because with the number of houses being built there, you are creating almost a new community on top of what's already there on the existing streets. I do think we have to have a level of thought about whether it's community cohesion, the coexistence of the residential housing and the industrial areas, which are both in growing, and how we're going to go for that in future when we look at the next LDP, because there's a lot has happened down the Bendricks within these proposals. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Ian, did you want to come back on any of those points?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, just in terms of the kind of relationship with employment uses and potential for those to be curtailed, it's a very valid point, and it's referred to in Planning Policy Wales. I mean, our view on it is that those existing uses, employment uses on allocated and existing employment sites, I think it's highly unlikely that the presence of new residential developments could be used as a reason to curtail them in the future. Those are, either permissioned or lawful uses, and there's nothing to stop them continuing to operate. There was a noise assessment with the application which concluded that the residential development can happily exist in that location. There are a couple of measures recommended for very limited few plots, which is recommended by a condition, and that's consistent with a condition on the adjacent housing site. Just in terms of Councillor Johnson's points, an affordable housing development, take for example one some time ago just off Thompson Street, that can justifiably have very, very low levels of housing, particularly when it's all one bed flats in a town centre location, is less likely to be reliant on car parking. A location like this, which is a little bit further out from the town centre and services, I think it's justifiable that the parking levels are slightly higher. They're not high in the context of market residential development, but I think there's justifiable reasons for them to be slightly higher. the site is accessible by other means, but that I think the presence of more than one-to-one parking doesn't infer it's not a sustainable location. In terms of community and cohesion, that's a subjective point really. My take on that would be that actually the relatively few number of houses in the Bendricks prior to this development and the one on the adjacent site, you might have argued they're a little bit out on a limb in terms of the settlement as a whole. Personally, I think consolidation of that residential form with new developments, which include some play space on this site and the other site, and also financial contributions to enable improvement of infrastructure. My opinion, actually, that is making for a better settlement, and one with, you know, no reason why that shouldn't have better social cohesion than the existing one. Residents are less likely to feel that they're in an isolated location away from the remainder of the settlement. So actually, I think it's a positive that we're consolidating that form in what is still essentially a sustainable location, albeit not town centre. It's still part of Barry, and Barry has all the facilities you need. And whilst it's further from shops than some houses, actually it's very close to employment opportunities and things like that.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, I've got Ben Gray's hand up. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We can clearly carry on debating on the points that come out of it, but I think this is a good scheme, and reminding ourselves back to when we had that sort of conversation at Home to Safe Communities that Councillor Johnson was referring to. I was there for that, and I think there was a positivity about the original intention for it to be a housing site as opposed to what was proposed and in front of the meeting then. And I got a sense that the community were okay with that, and certainly I can see from the contributions and the way the report is that the issues sort of raised that are of an operational sense in some regards, and I take on board all the points made, but I would move off to recommendations with the typo that was noted previously corrected with regard to the number of houses.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Cave, Christine Cave.
Thank you, Chair. I do wonder if the officer, Ian Robinson, could answer a question in relation to the matter raised by Councillor Johnson, in that this site was previously put forward for a plan for something other than housing, in fact a gypsy traveller site, and I know that we have made no progress whatsoever in identifying a site for the Vale, and I am slightly concerned that one of our only options is now being taken off the table.
I think I share your concern, but I don't think it's fair to put Ian on the spot, asking him about another application or provision of a.
Oh, sorry, Chair, I'm not asking about any other application. I'm just saying that this was identified for another purpose, and obviously that's had to be taken into consideration when the proposal was first being drawn up.
Yes, it's allocated as housing. It always has been allocated as housing, whether it's a gypsy traveller site or whether it's housing, standard housing, it still all comes as housing. Ian, I don't know if you want to comment or not on that, but
I think Vicky's put her hand up, so I'll let her respond.
Okay, Vicky.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to deal with that point, really, I'm sure Councillor Cave can recall that when that option was being considered a couple of years ago, it was in the end dismissed by Cabinet and no further action taken on that. Since then, more work has been undertaken by planning and housing colleagues working together to try and identify a site. That's been the subject of Cabinet reports and scrutiny reports recently, well, not recently, within the last 12 months, though. Looking at all the options and call for sites that have been ongoing, and with a resolution that more exploration would be done to find a site, this application, really shouldn't hinder on that process, because this site has already been dismissed for that purposes, and because it's allocated in the LDP, as Ian has alluded to, for this development, it would be totally inappropriate to prevent or pause any development of this site pending the outcome of that completely different process, which is ongoing and which obviously we hope to resolve in due course. So hopefully that addresses that issue.
Thank you, Vicky. Okay, so Ben has proposed. I'm happy to second the proposal. I don't see any other hands up, so I will go for a run on the voting on this. So the proposal is officer recommendation. I've seconded it. I am happy to vote for officer's recommendation. Councillor Gray?
For officer recommendation.
Councillor Birch?
For officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Cave?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Drake?
For officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll?
For.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, for.
Thanks, Vince. Councillor Edwards?
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp?
For.
Thank you. And no Councillor Parker. Councillor Rowlands?
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson has left us. Councillor Eddie Williams?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Wilson?
For.
And that's it. So 2 against, the rest are for. No abstentions. So it clearly passes. Okay, thank you. We will now move on to the next item, which is 2021 00550 full University Hospital land dock.
Sorry, Chair, can we just wait for Councillor Wilkinson to join?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Johnson, just interrupted you.
Yeah, I was just saying the same thing.
Okay. We do have a speaker on this as well while we're waiting. I'll just tell you, George Carroll, Councillor Carroll, will speak on this. No need to put your hand up, George. You will be brought in at the appropriate time. Christine, could you lower your hand as well, please? Thank you very much. Is Margaret back with us? I can't see her on the list yet. Yes, I do. Margaret, could you just confirm you're back with us?
I am here.
Super, thank you. Okay, over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on this application, just to note there is a matters arising note from a resident in Spencer Drive. Very briefly, the letter raises concern in relation to the proximity of the chimney to the trees, which are located at the back of some of the houses on Spencer Drive. The concern is if there were to be a fire in the chimney, that the fire could spread to the nearby trees, obviously with implications of health and danger, etc. So that's just one note on that application. So as the Chairman said, the application relates to University Hospital land dock. So it relates to the existing energy centre, which is located on the northern side of the hospital, which is effectively the sort of the power generation side of the hospital, which contains principally the boilers for steam and water heating. So in terms of a bit of context, this is the existing energy centre. You've got the existing 42-metre high brick chimney. You've got some oil tanks there. If you just run down, I think that's the water tower. So this is the residential side, and this is the hospital side of the site. So as you can see, the levels do change quite a lot, and obviously Landock Hospital is located on a bit of a plateau and obviously widely visible from surrounding viewpoints. So that's the internal layout of the energy centre. So at the moment you've got 3 boilers, and then you've got a single containerised CHP engine. So at the moment the boilers connect up to the chimney stack, and then the CHP engines, of which there are 3 of them, vent out on the hospital side of the roof. So the proposal effectively is to upgrade the existing energy centre by installing a brand new replacement CHP engine and remove 3 of the existing engines. So the new engine will connect up to the new chimney, which in terms of its height, as you can see, is 37 metres. So that's 5 metres below the height of the existing. That is the main part of the application. There's some small ancillary elements such as external dry air coolers and a blow down header for the boilers. The majority of the works actually are internal and don't actually require permission. So some of the works include, we'll just show you the, so go a little bit far there. I'll show you just the internal layout. So that's a new CHP engine. We've got 2 new replacement boilers, and the existing boiler will remain as a bit of a backup. And externally, again, that's the new dry air coolers and the blow down vessel. So the new boilers will be linked into the existing chimney. So even though they're shown, they're not actually part of the planning application. Those works are all internal. The new CHP engine, so rather than just simply venting out above the main roof, that is obviously because it's combined heat and power. So essentially the waste heat produced by the engine is going to feed in via heat exchanger, etc., into the new boiler, which obviously raises the temperature. So then so obviously the waste heat is then helps to produce the steam in the new combination boiler. So then the what is remaining then in terms of exhaust gases will vent out from the new chimney. So just going back, that's probably, I'm happy to answer sort of more technical questions about it, but obviously the report, the recommendation is made for approval. The main issues in relation to considerations are, one, a visual impact, and also air quality and noise. So say the technical assessments have been made. The constitutive responses are happy with the methodology of the acoustic report and the noise report, and are happy with the outcomes, say, subject to the mitigation being proposed actually being implemented. And in terms of visual impact, again, whilst if I can just, I will just run down, if I may, and show you. So these photos show existing views of the brick chimney from Spencer Drive, obviously very, very visible. You know, the hospital itself is a very, very dominating feature when viewed from the northern part. So these are 2 views from Spencer Drive. And then the next most visible road probably is Lewis Road. So again, you can see the back of the chimney and back of parts of the hospital, and then slightly further down the road, again, you see more of the hospital. So as part of the application, we required the agent to submit some CGI. So the CGIs do quite accurately show the views of the proposed new chimney. This is a view from the new development in Cannon Walk off Penland Road. There's another sample view here from this is the bottom end of Lewis Road near the terraced stone cottages. Again, you can see the 37-metre chimney in relation to the taller 42-metre brick chimney. Again, more distant viewpoints. As I said before, the site is on a plateau. So as you can see the existing chimney from Cardiff Bay and from the northern part of Penarth, so you can just see the new chimney sort of poking out, as it were. Obviously, it's not as prominent as the existing chimney, being much narrower, being grey, being of a reduced height. So, you know, whilst we're not disputing it's not going to be visible in terms of visual impact and harm, and particularly on the nearby dwellings in Spencer Drive and Lewis Road in Landock, whilst they will see it, the points they do see it are where the existing chimney can be viewed. So it's not going to impact on any sort of unimpacted viewpoints, as it were. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, before we go into the debate, as I said, we do have a speaker. Councillor Carroll has requested he would speak. Councillor Carroll, are you there?
I am, Chairman. Can you see and hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you. You have your 3 minutes from now.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I respectfully request that the committee vote to refuse the application on the grounds that it is unneighbourly and will impact adversely on residential amenity in the area. From viewing the plans, the committee will be aware that the proposed new chimney will be located closer to residential properties on Spencer Drive and Lewis Road than the existing structure. While I accept, as the visuals presented by Stephen show, the existing chimney is visible from those areas, the fact that this new structure will be closer to those residential properties means that it's not in keeping with the character of the area, and the potential impacts from noise disturbances both during the construction phase and during operation will be more considerable than those from the existing chimney. There were also concerns raised regarding the emissions from the structure. In the consultation phase on viewing residents' submissions, you will note concerns were raised by the Community Council in Landock regarding the receptors used within the area to determine that data, and they do not believe that data to be accurate. During the past 24 hours or so, I've been contacted by a resident from Spencer Drive that Stephen referred to in his opening remarks. That resident, as Stephen set out, fears the impact that a potential fire will have in that chimney due to its proximity to trees on the hospital estate. These trees, for those members of the committee who are not familiar with the area, back directly onto residential properties on Spencer Drive, and as such, that resident fears that any such fire that ignited those trees would then subsequently cause safety issues for residential properties and locals, and safety of local people in the area. For these reasons, Chair, as I set out, I respectfully request that the committee refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. You are within your time. Does anybody have any clarification points? No. Okay, we will come into the debate then. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I see Ben Gray has his hand up. Ben.
Before I come in, I wonder if Steve could just answer a couple of those points Councillor Carroll
yeah.
raised.
Sorry, yes, jumping ahead.
Yeah, of course. So firstly, in relation to the concern about air quality, obviously the report, a significant part of the report does address that. Prior to the application coming in and the air quality assessment being undertaken, the consultant had been in discussion with our air quality officer in respect of the methodology of receptors, etc. So, this report clearly states the officer is happy with the methodology and where those receptors have been taken from in terms of assessing the background noise levels. I mean, one thing that is worth emphasising that even though the air quality shows there won't be a significant impact, it's based on a worst case scenario by considering, as part of the background impact, the existing boiler emissions and when operating the CHP engines as well. So in fact, it's got a double counting the harms. So obviously, on the basis that the proposal will replace the existing significantly outdated equipment, it's clear from, say, the report findings that it's certainly not going to cause any, as I say, any greater impact than the existing. And then, as I say, the reports ultimately concludes that there's not going to be any harm. The current standards are much more rigorous, and there's something worth pointing out that the actual CHP engine itself is actually subject to an NRW permit. So NRW themselves will monitor and regulate the operation. If, for example, there are times when black smoke can be seen, that would be a matter of the NRW would step in. Also talking about the concerns raised by local residents in terms of fire risk, part of the NRW permit is the consideration of fire risk and mitigation. So again, that would all form part of the separate permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and yeah, very thorough report. I'm satisfied that the hospital needs to modernise. It's a hospital function. They live next to a hospital. I mean, the stuff on 187, the picture you showed earlier, it really isn't going to have that much additional visual impact. So I'm happy to move off to recommendations.
Thank you, Ben. I'm more than happy to second. Does anybody else want to ask a question or state a point? No? Okay. We will go to a vote then. So it has been moved officer's recommendation, which is for approval. I am happy to vote for officer's recommendation. Councillor Gray?
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Birch?
For officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Cave?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Drake?
For officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp?
Against.
Councillor Parker's not here. Councillor Rowlands?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Thomas?
For.
Thank you. Margaret, are you there? No, I think Margaret has dropped out, and I don't know whether we would actually be able to use Margaret's vote anyway, because she may have missed something. So, Councillor Williams, Eddie Williams.
For the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
For officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Okay, no Councillor Wright. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 9 for, 5 against. That is clearly carried officer's recommendation. So at this point, I thank you all, and I hand over to my vice chairman. I will see you all very shortly. Good luck. Good night.
Thank you, Councillor Bird, and thank you, everybody, back in the chair. Right, we move on to planning application 2019/01031/RG3. Can I just check Councillor Wilkinson hasn't actually come back in? She was someone else who also declared. Both Councillor Bird and Wilkinson have left.
I'll just double check now, Chair.
Thank you.
No, she's Councillor Wilkinson isn't on, Chair.
Okay, fantastic. In which case, I'll ask Steve to introduce. I can see you've shared your screen already, so you kick us off, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So in terms of a bit of a background on this one, members will probably recall this application being presented last summer on the 15th of July, when it was agreed to defer the determination whilst the subsequent Village Green application was resolved. So as part of those discussions as well, there were concerns raised in relation to the location of the plots, loss of trees, and extending the width of the approach footpaths. So just to read this. So so the site at the moment, I'll go on to the Village Green issue a little bit later, but in terms of the actual appearance of the site, it's a, let me just, sorry, relocate this, just drop down to photos. Right, okay. So those of you that are aware of the site, this is the turning into the site. This is a junction of Mysofunnon, and this road, I think, and that road are also called Mysofunnon. So this is the area of green open space opposite the existing housing, as part of the development for the site for 10 affordable houses, of which, as Ian alluded to with his application, again, this is the council's own application to build affordable housing. So it's 100% affordable housing, and it'll be social rented housing. So in terms of there were some highway improvements will be at this junction to improve the sweat bend and visibility. So this main part of the site will largely be retained, other than just the access further down. And this, at the moment, this is going to be retained. There's an existing turning area located towards the top end of the site. This is going to be the highway will be extinguished, and this area will be grassed and landscaped to match the adjoining area. So really, this is the main part of the site, which contained the former garages and the parking areas, and with incidental open space in between. So if I just run back to the layout. Okay. Right. So as I say, this is where that turning area was shown. So that turning is going to be reinstated into grass. So as we've said, it's an application for 10 affordable houses. In terms of the makeup, 4 would be 2-bedroom houses and 6 1-bedroom flats, 2 of which would be reserved for persons at least 55 years old. So again, the council are looking at kind of retirement type affordable housing units. So in terms of the design, I think the best thing would probably be to look at the CGIs, which are a bit more useful. So the elevation wise, it's very much copying the existing housing that's located along Mysofunnen. That's an example of the street scene. So, you know, we did some pre-application discussions on this. You know, from our point of view, quite quality detailing in terms of materials and finishes, with sort of a plain red pantile roof. Nice detailing over the windows, detailing over the porchways, arch brick heads, stone brick sills, etc. Very much copying the kind of established vernacular of the affordable houses along Mysofunnen. So in terms of the actual layout, as you can see, it's based around a relatively simple turning head. The house is front onto this courtyard approach with a shared access and turning head arrangement. Each dwelling will be served by two spaces. Parking spaces to the front, obviously footpaths that lead to the front of the dwellings. Amenity space provision at the back, so I can answer questions on amenity space a little bit later. Some trees are being lost to accommodate the development towards the bottom end of the site to provide the new access. And as you can see, these circular red dotted lines are the trees that will be removed. Equally, the scheme also proposes some more tree planting as well. So I'm happy to come back and answer more detailed questions. Just on the village green issue. So following inquiry on the 19th of July 2021 and the report by an independent inspector on 6th of June 21, a recommendation was made to the Vale of Glamorgan Council to dismiss the village green application. So the village green report and its recommendations were considered by the Public Protection Licensing Committee on the 15th of June 2021, where it was resolved to accept the recommendation of the village green report and dismiss the village green application. So from that point of view, you know, even though we're not disputing that the site isn't open space and will result in a lot of open space, it doesn't have that village green status that was the reason that the application was principally deferred last time. I'm happy to come back to answer any questions, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Steve. I think we'll obviously move on to our speakers. Yeah. We have 2 public speakers and a community council representative. As we'll note, the new procedures for speaking at planning committee have come into effect following last council meeting. So I will move on to our first public speaker, Mrs. Hunt. Can you confirm you are present with us?
Yes, I'm present. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And you're speaking your personal capacity. That's how you've registered to speak, I understand. And
that's correct. Yeah.
You will have 3 minutes. So whenever you're ready, you can start the clock on that.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kerry Hunt, and I moved to Bonvilston in 2015 while I was expecting my youngest son, Thomas. He's 5, and I also have a 14-year-old, Oliver. One thing that jumped out at me when I moved to the village is that Bonvilston is a very close community. However, it has very little recognised and usable green space, save for a parcel of land that to the rear of the reading rooms, which is remote and overgrown. The green space to the south of Myserfunnan, adjacent to the A48, is not safe for playing on due to its proximity to the main road, and I've never ever seen this space used for sport or recreation. Many residents of Myserfunnan moved to the street when the houses were first built and created a community around what we still consider to be our village green, despite the recent declaration to get the land formally registered. Although the legal direction following the public inquiry was to reject the green application on a technicality, it was agreed that this is a valuable space for the community's health and well-being. If the panel could have decided based on a moral obligation, then they would have chosen to protect the well-being of future generations. The deciding votes would have undoubtedly fallen in favour of protecting the space. Today you have that moral choice by rejecting the planning application and showing the children of our future community that the Vale Council cares. My children play regularly on the green, which I consider a safe space for them to go alone, gain some freedom and independence, not to the benefits that this brings to their health and well-being. It's been more and more important the last 18 months or so while we've been confined to our homes due to the pandemic. I often walk my dog on the public footpath, and the village green is being more and more used. The use has been exponentially increased in the last 18 months. Without this space during lockdown, the village would have been a very different place for us as a family and for the whole. Once it's gone forever. I quote in the introduction, Stephen stated, at the moment, that space, that part of that space will be retained. I would like to know what he means by at the moment. And I question that each dwelling is served by 2 parking spaces because I don't believe that that's the case. The demographic of Myserfunnan will undoubtedly change without this excessive development, with a switch to younger families moving into the area, more car traffic. This would put what's left of the play space at risk and make it dangerous for children to use. The loss of the only safe and usable green space in Bonvilston is in your hands today, and it would be very sad state of affairs to see it go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or clarification from the members of the planning committee? In which case, Mrs. Hunt, I'd ask you to mute yourself and turn your microphone, turn your camera off, and we'll move on to our next public speaker, Mrs. Clark. Can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I certainly can. Welcome to the committee. You will have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sian Clark, and I moved to Bonvilston in 2000. You know, the whole aspect in the area was something that I wanted to move back into, and you know, a place that I wanted to live. Whilst working from home during the pandemic, I've watched the children play on the green, sometimes with their mum and dad, as well as the villagers walking their dogs. It's provided the only and much needed space where neighbours had contact with each other for a socially distanced chat. And the health and well-being benefits that have been brought to Bonvilston because of the green far outweigh any that could be brought to the community through additional housing. And I dispute the fact that there is a need for this type of housing within Bonvilston. In fact, the erection of the proposed dwellings would have such a negative impact on the community and the village and village life and well-being benefits of the village green. Before COVID, this area was used regularly for gatherings. We had fetes, we had bonfires, concerts, and I know as a community, it brought us together, and we are really looking forward to being able to do those activities again. The Vale of Glamorgan Council themselves have recognised the area as a green area that has been used by the community for over 50 years, and in the recent public inquiry went on record as confirming and recognising this, and also confirmed that they had maintained the area for the residents to use. And as Kerry pointed out, it was a technicality by which that it was refused. The inspector's recommendation was made on a technicality in relation to a terminology around that usage. And I think despite what the ecological survey found in the area and claimed, because it was clearly poorly researched, there was a huge wealth of wildlife in Maes Ffynnon. There's bats, there's owls, there's greater crested newts. I'd like to point out that those newts have already been redirected to a pond which sits just behind the proposed site development and is actually called the Newt Pond, and they've been redirected from the current development at Cottrell Gardens. There are a significant number of trees that have preservation orders on them, and they'll also serve to support the local bat and owl population. There are other added issues regarding the parking, lack of space. There are elderly residents that do not have cars at present, and with these additional houses, the parking would become absolutely unmanageable here, and would be, the problems that we currently have would be exacerbated. I believe these dwellings would spoil and ruin the only green space that Bombleston has, along with all of the positive
apologies.
Okay. Apologies.
Oh, right there, right at the end of the sentence. Apologies about that.
Slightly over.
Okay, that was your 3 minutes. Before you disappear visually and audibly, committee, have you got any questions of clarification? I don't think Mrs. Clark said. No, in which case I'd ask you to turn your camera off and your microphone off, please. You're welcome, of course, to stay and observe the rest of the debate. And our final speaker, Councillor Ian Perry from the Town and Community Council. Are you with us? I can see you've just appeared. Thank you, Ian. You will have just pulled over. Can I just check I can hear you properly then? Sorry, I cut across you.
Yep. Can you everyone hear me? Good afternoon.
Fantastic. Okay. You'll have your 3 minutes from wherever you start. Thank you.
Thank you. The Community Council had an EGM last night to reconsider the application due to the slight amendments of July 20th. And I can confirm the Community Council is unanimously objecting to this proposal with a huge list of reasons for refusal. We do have a nature emergency, and we do have a housing crisis. Now, the housing crisis, there are 500,000 empty properties in the UK. Now, 10 new dwellings will not tackle that housing crisis, as important it is that we try and do something. What we need to concentrate on today is this green space. And since last July, the Welsh Government has published 2 documents, one called Building Better Places, which is a response to the pandemic, and Planning Policy Wales 11. I will just take you through those 2 documents. Planning Policy Wales 11 states that recreational spaces are vital for our health, well-being and amenity, contributing to our way of life. Physical activities that green spaces facilitate are important for the well-being of children and adults. In 4.5.3, Planning Policy Wales states formal and informal green spaces should be protected from development. Open green spaces contribute to biodiversity and nature, and we have a nature emergency declared by the Vale of Glamorgan Council. Planning authorities should protect playing fields and open spaces which have significant amenity or recreational value to local communities from development. That is 4.5.5, all things that have been raised by residents of Bombleston. The planning system must give preference to the provision of nature-based solutions, including green infrastructure, assets and networks as a vital part of our local and national infrastructure, and to safeguarding resilient ecological networks and securing a net benefit for biodiversity. And it talks about particularly small local parks being protected, where we have seen children exercising and playing during the pandemic. So that's going back to building better places. So Welsh Government policy is firmly behind trying to, protecting these parcels of land. In fact, the Community Council has asked for a community asset transfer, and we were refused. We also asked in 2019 to participate in the Welsh Government's local places for nature, and the Housing Department refused to allow the Community Council to participate in that. So the Community Council has the money. We ring-fenced the money in 2019. We've not spent that money, and we have that which we could use to purchase the land and enhance it. The actual development, the 10 new dwellings, there is a shortage of private amenity space. That's addressed in the documentation because there's public open space. There's a new development in Bonvilleston of 120 new dwellings. Only 12 of those new dwellings have been sold, and that's since they started building in 2018, and only 5 are occupied. So when the Vale of Munan Council say, well, there's new open space coming along with a new development, that's now not certain and can't be guaranteed to happen.
That's your time up, I'm afraid. It goes quickly,
it does
really quickly. Are there any questions or clarification from the committee members? I don't see any hands. People would be poised with their hands.
Yes,
So
yes, Chair, I've got one.
Okay, yes, go for it, Councillor Driscoll.
Yeah, just a question of Councillor Perry, really, obviously. How many of those 120 houses are social housing? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. Now, there was a significant amount of extra social housing going to be provided there.
Any other clarifications from Councillor Perry? I don't see any hands. Any interventions like Councillor Driscoll did just then? No? Okay, I'll just ask Steve or maybe one of the other officers wants to come back on any of those points. Steve's sharing his screen.
I'm happy to come back. Obviously, you know, lots of issues raised there in terms of open space, the community and parking. Just a couple of points. Just on the parking spaces, I slightly stand corrected. It's 2 dwellings per. It's two spaces per dwelling with 1 space per flat. So obviously the layouts that I've got in. Sorry, let me just move you away. As you can see, it's 2 spaces per dwelling and 1 space per flat. So obviously, clearly there's obviously concerns, frustration in relation to the loss of what is being described as a village green or public open space. So you know, the reference has been made to the technicality of the village green application being dismissed. Nevertheless, it's been dismissed. So we are, you know, we're nevertheless still considering this as open space. But as you can clearly see, in terms of the, you know, the application site as a whole and how much is being retained, you know, there's quite, in our opinion, a very, very usable area of let's call it informal open space and amenity space in terms of nature conservation, etc. And it's roughly about 2/3 of the site is being built up, but equally 1/3 of it is being retained, which in terms of many developments, having 1/3 of a site retained and developed as grassland and trees is actually a pretty good ratio. Again, in terms of ecology, you know, we've gone through the ecology process. Our council's ecologist is happy with what's been proposed. I mean, you know, we are asking for a scheme of ecological enhancements. Again, that is targeting the nature emergency. Again, you know, we're very familiar with Planning Policy Wales 11 and building better places, etc. And to be honest with you, that's what we're trying to do here. You know, again, the site is within this. It's important to note the site is within the settlement of Bonvilleston. It's not rounding off. It's not an exception site. And if you're talking about building communities, there's no better way to build community than a really well balanced, you know, 10 affordable units located in a, you know, a very logical layout and a very logical extension within the settlement itself. You know, we feel that the site is really well balanced. You know, it works well with the number of houses, the existing houses, which obviously were originally built as rural district affordable housing, you know, in their time. And it's basically the next reiteration of council bringing on, you know, much needed affordable housing. Just on the point raised in respect of Cottrell Gardens and 120 dwellings, obviously, you know, we're aware that the progress on that site has been slower than probably first anticipated. But in terms of affordable housing need, under the consultation section of the report, I've actually set out the more up-to-date need within the ward. So for one bedroom houses, it's 1 bedroom units, it's in need of 80 within the ward of Wenvo, and for 2 bedroom it's 63, which that actually supersedes what's in the report. But just in terms of need as well, I'd just like to reference the how successful the St Nicholas sites have been. So in the Redrow site in St Nicholas, there were 25 social rented units, which were obviously taken on by Havard. And the Waterstone site, there were 6 social rented, which were taken on by Newydd, and all of those social rented units have been taken up, as have the LCHO units. So obviously, in the absence of any affordable housing coming on the and some time off on the Cottrell Gardens site, you know, we are as a council reliant on delivering affordable housing scheme ourselves here, rather than relying on, you know, the private market building out and then transferring to an RSL. So in effect, this is us getting ahead of the game, really, and you know, say, delivering what really is needed in Bonvilston, given the, you know, the big take up in St Nicholas, and obviously the need in the wider Wenver ward. So I think I've covered possibly most elements there, but I'm happy to come back.
Thank you, Steve. So just to clarify, these are, as the report states out, socially rented. So the rate at which other properties are selling is not a material consideration.
So sales-wise, no, that's right.
These would go on to the Homes for You list.
Homes for You and let, and yes, that's right, local letting.
Marcus, I'll bring you in, and then Councillor Kemp's indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, apologies. I don't know what's happened to my computer connection. I'm on my own device, so apologies if you can. I hope you can hear me. Just to add to what Steve has said, obviously it's important to note that the part of the site where the majority of the housing is built is currently a parking courtyard or redundant parking courtyard with garages and other items on there. There is some trees around the edge of it, but the majority of the usable green space is retained and will be retained as part of the development. And I know Steve has made that point. The other key issue, just to point out, is that you know, the land is not defined as playing field and wasn't defined as playing field previously. So that is an important note, but also by this scheme coming forward, that land will be retained as a green area as part of the scheme itself. It's shown there, as Steve said, virtually 40% of the site, 30 to 40% of the site is retained for that. So that is what we would call developing a really good scheme. And then the really final point to note, which I think Steve also mentioned, is that those houses next to it are obviously the first iteration, if you like, of council houses dating back to earlier in the last century. They're important houses in as much as how they're designed, and what we've tried to do as a council in designing this scheme, what the housing team has done, is to try and tie in as closely as possible to those designs, and you can see them there as Steve is showing. So it is a continuation of that existing housing scheme. Obviously, the majority of those have been sold now, but the current scheme will be retained for social housing, much needed social housing. The report spells out very clearly how much need there is for that social housing in the Bonvilston area and wider area. It's you know, I had a meeting today with housing colleagues, and they stressed again how important that housing is for the local community.
Thank you, Marcus. I mean, I do want to note before I bring Councillor Kemp in, I am a bit disappointed that someone from housing or someone who could speak to this development wasn't available to speak in the meeting. I think it would have aided the conversation. But that noted, Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Chairman, or Vice Chairman, I should say. I think it's always disappointing in these circumstances that we hear it sort of said, well, we're using 2/3 of the site, we're retaining 1/3. It's a pity that any of the site has to be used for something like this. It is for those who've looked at it, and I appreciate that in probably normal times we would have had a site visit to look at this, but I'm hoping that most of the members will have availed themselves of the opportunity to go and look at it themselves and see what actually is there. I appreciate that the issue of whether or not this should have been a village green is now being dealt with. That's a shame, because I think in the community we have in Bonvilston, this area would have been very, very useful as to be designated in that way. it's a comparatively small site. I think it's going to be. It appears to me, certainly looking at the plans, and it's always difficult just to look at plans rather than try and then see something when it's built. But once it's built, it's far too late. I am concerned that as what's being used here. It's been mentioned about the issue of climate emergency, and going back, of course, to when we debated the issue of model farm. It was mentioned that the council declares that, but unfortunately, planning constraints don't enable us at the moment really to take that into account. I say I'm extremely unhappy with this development. I think it is something which is not. I don't think it's needed in the community. So I won't be happy to vote in favour of this.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I see Marcus has indicated, so I'll bring him in, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Cave. Marcus, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's very, very important that when terms like climate emergency are used, that the planning system isn't taking account of them, that's clarified, because that is completely incorrect. Climate emergency, or the declaration of a climate emergency, does not prevent future development. If it did, then we'd all not have a job and we might as well go home. What it does do is it means that we must take account of the climate and the changes to the climate in the future developments that happen. This report deals with that in quite some detail, and points out actually there's a desperate need for housing going forward for this community. I don't know where Councillor Kemp's getting these figures from, but clearly this community does need, it has a demand for housing, and it is shown in the report and is shown by housing colleagues. So I think it's really, really important that we don't use that blasé sort of term climate emergency to dismiss all development, when we must take account of all elements of what are material considerations in determining applications. Just declaring a climate emergency does not mean we can't develop. Developers can't bring forward schemes. It doesn't mean that the council can't seek to ensure that the residents of Bondleston are able to have suitable housing to live in. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Marcus. And I'll bring in Councillor Cave, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I don't really want to go over some of the points that have already been made, but when this application came to committee previously, I did, like I'm sure most of the committee, go down and have a look, because we're not having site visits at the moment, although I do think it would have been helpful had we had a site visit for this. I think it's an area of outstanding natural beauty, and that hasn't been mentioned by anybody. I think if you go down and you have a look, it really is a beautiful area, and it's been noted that previously this was and has housing of a social nature. And it's a sad reflection on where we are as a society today, that previously social housing was deemed to have open spaces such as these, which have then grown in beauty over that time. And that today we're being told that we shouldn't have those areas, or that there's one need that's a priority over another. And what we seem to be saying is the need of the people that were already there, that was outlined in the past when social housing came along, which was to have green open space around it. And that is very limited green open space, I have to say. And it's only the fact that the trees that were planted there at the time have grown substantially into, as I say previously, a real area of outstanding beauty. And it is a sad reflection that we now want to see the need that hasn't properly been described by certainly those in the community council and those living locally, that we have to, or we're being asked to prioritise that need over the need of the people that are already living there. I think it's a very sad reflection on where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Cave. I just feel I need to comment. I visited the area, and the predominant building area that I could observe was the redundant foundations of the garage structure alongside the housing. I don't know, maybe we could just clarify, and perhaps there's a particular legal term to do with area of outstanding natural beauty. Marcus, you're indicating.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, you're quite correct. The area at the back of the site, while it has trees at the edges, was a former tarmacked or concreted area with garages on. So I think the term area of natural beauty probably could be reflective of the area in front of the houses. That's a very attractive area of land, and that is being retained in front of the existing houses, I should say. The important point as well is that an area of outstanding natural beauty is a designation, which of course does not have that designation. There we are. Some of the photos have been put up now to show the area, which is of course hard surface, as you can see there. But obviously, the area in front of the houses you can see in the distance there would be retained as a green area for residents to use going forward.
Marcus, you were dropping in and out a little bit on your voice there, but I think most of the members got the gist of it. I certainly did. If there's any clarification, I'll certainly ask. Councillor Birch, you had your hand up next, please.
Yes, thank you. There are a couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, the fact that there are council houses in this village which were built as council houses because it was necessary to house the population overspill at that time, and they've all been sold. But the necessity is still there, because where do we expect the children of the people who live in the village at the moment to live if there is not going to be any provision made for them? And I'd also like to make the point that in a previous application, we talked about forward planning of retirement properties. And my understanding is that at least 2 of the properties that are being projected to be built here are for people who are age 55 plus, which strikes me as a prime example of planning for an elderly population. Both of which are reasons I would be supporting the application.
Thank you. Are you moving off the recommendations, or are we going to carry on talking?
I am moving off to recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Johnson, and then I can still see your hand raised, Councillor Cave, so I will come back to you if you need to come in again. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is we had a good discussion on this application when it first came before us, and we had we discussed the implications of the Village Green application. Obviously, the Village Green application has fallen largely on technicality, but I understand the report. My reading of the report is that this area has been used as a public open space by residents of Bombleston over many years, well beyond the 20 years that's required for an actual Village Green had it met the application. I see this as a bit of a tension. I feel a tension here between development and the nature emergency that we discussed as a council a couple of weeks ago. So I mean, I look at the plans and I see what looks like to me like from a planning perspective a quite neat rounding off of the village. It's within the settlement boundaries, and it also maintains an area of public open space, however we want to define that, that's within Mice of Funnon. Where I feel less content is from the ecology side, and particularly where we have, say, some of the tests where they talk about, oh well, if we do nothing, then well it'll just be rubbish, then won't it? Which doesn't feel to me to be an appropriate consideration of the potential uses for the site from an independent perspective. Where I struggle, we have discussions about the amount of amenity space and the housing need in the Wenvo ward area. Obviously, the Wenvo ward in its present form comes to an end in a couple of months' time and will be replaced by the St Nicholas Llancarvan ward. St Nicholas with Bonvillestone is obviously a separate community council, and we've heard from their representative earlier. I'm a little concerned that we've brought through, again, despite the discussion a while back, we've brought through a Reg 3 application for development that doesn't seem to have the support of the local community, which is being affected by it. This is the feels, therefore, that the Vale of Glamorgan doing something rather than the Vale of Glamorgan being in listening mode. So I'll accept the point, for example, that Councillor Birch has made and made by officers. The fact that there is a tension that exists, which is very different, say, to the discussion we had about the Bendricks earlier, where Barry Town Council said, yes, this is a good scheme, we're happy with it, leads me to have, sort of reservations about this and the way that's going, because this is our proposal, we're bringing it forward, and yet we're not bringing it forward with the clear support of the local community council and residents who've spoken tonight. I appreciate that residents who come to speak at these events maybe aren't always entirely representative of everybody within an area, but having the identified need for the local area rather than the wider ward, which is miles, I think would have helped me tonight. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I've asked James Doherty, our lawyer, to just comment, because a number of speakers and members have made reference to the village green technicality, and whilst it's not a purely planning reason, it wasn't a purely planning reason we deferred earlier. We wanted to see the outcome of the village green application. I think it would be useful if we understood what the context of that was. If you're okay to elaborate on that, please, James.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was obviously all set out in the inspector's report. I mean, in terms of the technicality that's being referred to, it makes it potentially sound like it was, you know, something went awry. I think what the inspector found was that there was an incompatibility with the status of it as a village green, as opposed with the land being held by the Housing Department under its Housing Act duties. There wasn't much debate in relation to the actual user of the land during the inquiry. The council relied on its specific point. So just to make it clear, there's nothing untoward. It was strictly the strict legal position was it was incompatible with being found as a village green.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's helped clarify. I'm happy to second officer recommendations. I recognise the points. I've had the benefit of the site visit. I've listened to the argument, and so I would second the move of officer recommendations. I can see Rhiannon, you've got your hand up. Is that for another intervention? Possibly from the other person in the room? No. Okay. Fine.
I'm taking it down.
No worries. No, it's down. That's great. I'm going to move us forward to a vote on this. I think we've aired a discussion and we have had a previous discussion on the points, and so I think we can move forward to a vote. I've got the sheets here. My first time going through this virtual vote, so bear with me. Obviously, Councillor Bird isn't with us. I'm voting for officer recommendations. Councillor Birch, please.
As I put forward, officer recommendations, please. Support all.
Thank you. Councillor Cave.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Drake.
For officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll.
Against officer recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards. Stuart Edwards.
Against officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Parker's not here. Councillor Rowlands, please.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Neil Thomas.
Yeah, sorry, 4.
4. Okay. Councillor Wilkinson's not in the room. Councillor Williams, please.
For the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
For officers' recommendations.
Okay, so that's 6 in favour and 7 against. So at this stage, that doesn't mean that the planning application has fallen, because we haven't got a planning reason for refusal. We voted on the acceptance of it or not. I'm going to seek a deferral. Marcus, do you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So to move forward, we would need to have, if the application were to be recommended for refusal, you'd have to have substantiated reasons for refusal. It's very difficult to see what those reasons would be currently, even following the debate. So the other issue really would be that obviously this isn't the local ward member who has refused it. So it would be necessary, possibly in this circumstance, to get a lead member notified, who would be the lead member who would appear as any appeal, should there be an appeal against the decision of the committee going forward, to put forward the committee's view in respect of any refusal. So because obviously it's very difficult for officers to do that in this particular case, given the recommendation and given the obviously the fact it's a council-owned site, which is slightly different to some other situations. So just pointing those issues out really at this stage for members. So probably the first thing to do would be to for members, if they were to come forward with a reason for refusal for voting, was to nominate a lead member to lead in any possible appeal in the future.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. So amongst the 7 who voted against, could someone move a refusal with a planning reason if they feel they have one? Looking for a hand from anybody? Councillor Cave, you've got your hand up. You want to speak? You're muted if you're trying to speak,
Yes,
sorry.
yes, no. Well, as I said earlier, it's balancing one need against another. I would say that taking land that is currently used as a recreational space is unneighbourly.
Okay. Unneighbourly, sorry, if we can make sure our mics are muted unless you're taking part. Unneighbourly development is a planning reason. Unneighbourly insofar as we may need to elaborate further. James, or because one of the officers advised, before we move to a resolution, we have to have a planning reason laid out.
The land, so Chair, if I could just come back in, the land isn't allocated for amenity purposes or as open space, and therefore, from a planning perspective, it would be very, very difficult to substantiate any reason for refusal based around that. In terms of unneighbourly, obviously the scheme is such that it's been designed to be appropriate in its location. So were we to try and define it as unneighbourly by virtue of the residential properties being there, I think that would be very difficult. But obviously that is for members to make that decision. I would advise that with extreme caution in terms of any possible appeal, that obviously the decision has to stand up, or it will be deemed to have been a frivolous decision, and we could be liable to costs as a council. Obviously, It's our scheme, so we're not going to go for costs against ourselves. But clearly, it's not a situation where we'd want to be putting ourselves in a position where we could not substantiate a reason for refusal.
Yeah, I think I'll bring you in a second, Councillor Thomas. I think ultimately, in my role here chairing this discussion, we need to move this forwards, and we're in this state of limbo. I think we can agree that unneighbourly is a subjective term as opposed to a technical term, and it is one which can be up for debate. And it may well be that when we go back through, if that's the resolution, we have 7 people who are for it being unneighbourly and 6 people against, and that's why it fails. I just want to be clear that we don't need to add any words to that if this is the reason that those people who are voting against wish to use. That it would that is a reason under planning. Clearly, I voted for it, so I'm not moving that. I'm just I'm trying to facilitate the discussion.
To use the term unneighbourly, you have to define why it's unneighbourly, because it's not a term in its own right. So would it be unneighbourly by virtue of overlooking? Would it be unneighbourly by virtue of the use of the land, removing its use from something else? But unfortunately, the use of the land was previously a garage courtyard associated with the existing housing there. So it would be very difficult to justify that as being unneighbourly. The only argument that could be put forward is that the properties themselves being located on that site are unneighbourly to the existing properties. And that would have to be unneighbourly in a way that was defined. So are they unneighbourly because they create overlooking to an extent that are overbearing, or are in such a way that they block out natural daylight or sunlight in a way that has an impact on those existing properties? So you have to define it as, you can't just say it's unneighbourly. It has to be defined in a way that spells out why it is unneighbourly.
Okay, apologies, Councillor Thomas. I'm going to go back to Councillor Cave, because obviously we were just trying to clarify the points. Councillor Cave, if you're there, clearly moving unneighbourly, we just need a bit more detail. I hope you've had sufficient advice from the officers as to the range of that, and maybe you could just settle us down on exactly how we're defining it.
Yes, I have heard what officers have said now. You know, for me, the space is we're being asked to decide to take away somebody's green space, whether that green space is being, well, I think we are. And that's, you know, I'm entitled to that opinion. And that's what I'm talking about at the moment. This is my opinion, that, and it is my belief that we are taking away some open space here that the community have already come along and said that they believe is their open space. Now, you know, who defines what a village green is? You know, obviously the council is saying it isn't a village green, but the villagers are saying that they believe that they do use it as open space. And, you know, for me, it isn't very neighbourly for somebody else's need to be prioritised over the people that are already there. And so if the term unneighbourly isn't suitable, then maybe we need to do what we did previously at the previous meeting, and that is go away and then come back at the next meeting and decide what the terminology should be.
I would hazard a guess, because in the context of the debate, we're talking about White House Farm, the earlier application. There was a number of points raised in the debate by people that were attached to substantive planning reasons, and in that case, there were some on the fence issues in the report. So it was easier for us to, for officers, to draft reasons. I think it would be useful to, if Councillor Thomas will permit me, I'm gonna call a 5-minute recess to get some advice. I have a clear understanding, chairing this meeting. I have a majority of members who don't wish this to go through. I wish to give you the best support possible in order to make sure that when you then have a vote on the reasons for refusal, that you have a defendable position, or you have a planning reason to stop that, which obviously isn't laid out in the report. So
can I just ask a very brief question before you do that? And it's simply, was this allocated as for building under, and it's a brownfield site, was it allocated on the LDP?
Well, yeah. It's in, if I can come back on that, it's within the settlement boundaries. So by virtue of the LDP process looked at where settlement boundaries were drawn, it was considered as an appropriate site of effectively rounding off within the settlement boundary in terms of its form and relationship. You know, it's partly brownfield, so it related to the settlement. So by the fact that it's within the settlement boundary, almost gives it effectively an outline consent and saying residential development or redevelopment is acceptable in principle.
So really, it's difficult to find any grounds to reject this.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, Councillor Thomas, unfortunately, I can't keep asking people to vote for something. We've had that vote, so now we need to just drill down on what the reason is going to be put forward and who's going to take that lead to own the reason why it's being refused. So if don't leave the meeting, I'm going to step out of the meeting and just have a chat with officers and come back with some guidance so that we're not unduly. If people stay in the meeting but turn your cameras off and come back in 10 minutes, have a toilet break, and we'll see you at 6:20.
Chair, I'll stop the recording.
Thank you. And if we can go into the pre-meeting Teams meeting, please.
Okay.
Okay. Mark. So benefits of the recording and to any members of the public, just to advise, we've finished a short recess. As chair of this section of the meeting, as vice chair of the planning committee, I've taken advice from officers and our lawyer with regard to how to proceed. I will run over that and then ask them to give a more detailed response. But before I do, Councillor Hodges, you have your hand up, please.
Thank you. I'm trying to be
Chair,
helpful.
Sorry, Councillor Hodges, sorry, Chair. I just want to double check that they're actually live streaming. If you can bear with me, I'm just speaking to my colleague Andy Brain. Okay, bear with me a second.
Okay.
The stream is back up, Mark.
Okay, fantastic. Councillor Hodges, apologies, carry on.
That's okay. I'm trying to be helpful here. I voted against the scheme because I don't like it. And if I tell you why I don't like it, perhaps this can form some of the basis of the refusal. If I had spoken in the meeting, I would have actually said perhaps this application should be deferred, because the layout to me just seems very strange. What you've got within this site is you've got the houses and flats being built right at the end, and then having this large and I think largely unnecessary roadway coming in, which actually uses more of the green space than I think is necessary. It seems strange to me that when you look at the plot within the context of the existing village, you have the row of houses going up towards the present greenfield place from Maes Ffynnon. Why aren't the houses and flats being built in a more continuous row as a natural extension of what is existingly there? To me, that would save more of the space, be probably a more friendly addition to the village, and it would actually make it more neighbourly. They would be part of it rather than this strange artificial cul-de-sac.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, in other words, can we have a better scheme? I don't want to see the Vale appealing against its own planning committee when there could be a scheme brought back to us that would probably satisfy more or all of us. That's the point I want to make.
Okay. Broadly, thank you, Councillor Hodges. Broadly, I was going to give an overview which lent towards a deferral in order to give a cooling off period and time to reflect on the points within here. But Vicky, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you. Just to address that point, really, I think that is obviously a design solution that could have been looked at, but I think it would not obviously generate the same number of houses because of the shape and size of the plot. There would only, you'd probably be halving the amount of developable area to simply extend the existing row of houses, which is presumably our housing colleagues have tried their best to come up with a scheme where the density is appropriate, the impacts are addressed, and for all the reasons we've set out in the report, we think they've done a good job of doing that. So obviously they could consider submitting an amended proposal if members were prepared to defer the application on that basis, but I think that would clearly explain why they haven't simply added a couple of extra houses on the end of the row, which would not provide the same number of units.
Thank you. If I can just round up what we, I think, usefully used our time away from the committee to do was to try and ascertain, initially to try and ascertain a planning reason based on the indications given by Councillor Cave with regards to unneighbourly from green space. It was noted in the report that actually the technicality you may be able to use was around total amenity green space in the ward being lost, maybe something. However, the report notes there's a 1.5 hectare surplus in amenity green space, so the technicalities under the planning law wouldn't necessarily permit that as a reason. I'm going to speak in cross terms, and then Marcus can correct me when I've finished my little monologue. I think that it's important, therefore, that we have a cooling off period and that those who are minded to refuse have an opportunity to speak with planning officers in order to gain an appropriate wording or indeed explore how we can progress that forwards. I noted in the main debate, I was disappointed that housing didn't come along to talk to us. And I think that somewhere along the line between consideration of a design change, and take on board Councillor Hodges' point, making a presentation to the committee, I would ask it to come back to a future meeting. I wouldn't tie our hands to the very next meeting, but I think it's important we resolve this as soon as we can. So I would move a deferment in order to have a cooling off period. We would revisit this planning application again, and then those people who are minded to move a refusal would be armed with the data in order to do that. And equally then, if there are elements such as design or anything else that have altered people's opinions to either vote for or abstain, then that would be addressed at that future meeting. But more importantly, we'd have that cooling off time in order to get the appropriate response. So that's my proposal. I don't know if that's a seconding or mirroring. Councillor Hodges, before Marcus comes in, yes, I will take your hand. Sorry, you're muted, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Normally, if this wasn't a Council Reg 3 application, if this was a private individual or firm, we'd say, well, you've got a free go, haven't you? But that's not an issue, I think, tonight. I would like to see a scheme that is better suited to the site and better suited to not having such a big access road for such a small number of dwellings. I think it can be done. It may be that the number of units built is smaller, but at the moment you've got a refusal, so I think it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and so hopefully between us we have a motion there to defer for a future meeting, and we can move forward with that. And I think that certainly, yes, none of us want to be in a position where the council's appealing against the planning committee, and we certainly will have to explore how such an appeal was supported, and that may well involve using third parties and so forth. So if we can get to a resolution, then clearly we want to. I'm going to bring Marcus in, then I'm going to bring Councillor Williams in. Marcus, please.
Thank you, Chair. You've explained it all very, very well. You mentioned our housing colleagues. I think it's essential that if this is deferred, that our housing colleagues are here. It's a shame they're not here to talk about some of the finer design matters. Clearly, all we can talk about is the acceptability of the scheme we have before us. I think obviously members may want to ask some questions in terms of how that scheme came to its sort of final fruition, if you like, and I think it will be very, very important that those colleagues are there. So yeah, we will be. We certainly could make that point if the application were to be deferred.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Williams next.
Wilson.
No. Councillor Williams had his hand up before.
That's okay. I didn't see that.
Before Rianne Mark, Councillor Williams had his hand up. Eddie, please.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. Yeah, I understand the difficulties you've got in generating reasons, and clearly we're in a position where we do want to have a successful plan in place. So I'm seconding your movement to defer.
Okay, yeah, I think between us we've got a mover and a seconder. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about any appeal. Now, say for instance, if the council did appeal against its own planning committee, and it turned out that say if the appeal was successful upheld, would those councillors who voted today, would they be surcharged?
I think it was covered earlier. The council wouldn't seek costs against itself. I think was
don't threaten us, Mark.
I think that was already stated. But Marcus, I don't know if you want to clarify further on Councillor Wilson's point.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. No, that would not be a situation that would be likely to arise. But obviously, we hope we don't get to that position anyway.
Okay. Unless there are any dissenters, I would move the vote on deferment. But before I do, Vicky.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. I just wanted to say that the Planning Inspectorate have new powers to impose costs, regardless of an application for costs being made. So it's not entirely within the council's gift to say that they won't make an application for costs. An appeal inspector can impose that application for costs, but obviously if it's the council as applicant and defendant, then it's someone in the council's paying somewhere, irrespective of who calls for the costs. But I just wanted to clarify that there is that ability, if the planning inspector feels that a particular party has been unreasonable, they can impose their own award of costs.
That's useful. Not one that I knew before, but I think, as we've stated, the moving money around would still be the issue there. Okay, if there's no dissent, I'll ask for dissent now to the idea of a deferment. So anyone putting their hand up now, we're going to be going to a formal vote on deferment. If we're happy to take the unanimous position of a deferment, sorry, Councillor Hodges, you're on mute still. Sorry, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy for a deferment. In fact, I think that's possibly where we should have gone in the first place. But what I would say is I want to see a different scheme. I don't want this scheme coming back. That will waste everyone's time, including my own.
I think we'll note the fact that your vote won't change if the scheme looks the same when it comes back. But I don't, as you well know from planning, we can't dictate to someone how their plan should look, but we'll certainly express the views back. I think we've covered that previously. I realise we're talking about the council, but I will just make that point.
Plans. I would like a different one, please.
We are okay. Just for clarity, we're the planning authority in this sense, and I'm not the executive responsible for those plans. Okay, I haven't seen any dissent, so I'm going to move as a unanimous decision around deferment, and that is for the reasons I stated previously, and I would hope we can come back to as soon as possible, but I don't want to tie our hands to the very next meeting, but let's not let this one slide, please, too long. If everyone's happy with that, which case that brings our meeting to an end, and we'll see you all. Actually, it's at the end of September. I believe it's the 29th. So have a good September. See you then. Bye-bye.